Please welcome APTA Chair Nuria Fernandez.
Good afternoon. Hasn't it been an amazing 2 days? I think we need to say thank you, APTA. The APTA team has really done an extraordinary job in getting us to this session. But I thought that all of the awards recipients this morning were standing up here and they were beaming, because this is such an important thing that we do, and it's recognize those who have achieved tremendous things in our industry, but also celebrate those who are coming up. So Leadership APTA, the graduate class, significant, and then certainly as we looked at those 38 scholarship recipients, worthy. That is our future. So thank you all for supporting them. I am so pleased to be here today for this session, both to introduce a very important topic and also to introduce a very good friend. In almost every line of work today, and equally so in our lives, we're all focused on how change is impacting our lives. From new technologies for operating systems to seeing who is at your front door by simply looking at your iPhone. Every day brings new experiences, new opportunities, and new challenges. Nowhere is it more apparent than in our industry, where we must deal with maintaining systems built decades ago, plan new ones, and compete for savvy customers able to instantaneously compare the arrival time and price for 5 different travel options. So to deliver transformative service, to compete in this time of rapid change, public transit agencies must themselves transform their mission, their relationships and leadership, their employees, and their service. This session explores transformation at the nation's 2 largest transit agencies. 2 I hold dear to my heart, having worked for both, the Chicago Transit Authority and the New York MTA. Dorval Carter, president of the Chicago Transit Authority, will be moderating this session. Dorval and I go way back, and we started working back in the 80s, and we've shared our careers in 2 places, both at CTA and then at the Federal Transit Administration, so that's Chicago and Washington. And there are not many positions at CTA that Dorval has not filled. He began in 1984 as a staff attorney, served as the general attorney for corporate law. He was also the executive vice president and chief administrative officer, and since 2015, president of the nation's 2nd largest transit agency. CTA provides some 500 million trips every year, serving the city of Chicago and 35 surrounding suburbs and employing over 10,000 professionals. In between these jobs at CTA, Dorval has played a major role at the US DOT and the Federal Transit Administration, serving as general counsel of FTA's Region 5, FDA General Counsel, acting deputy FDA administrator, then as the U.S. Department of Transportation acting chief of staff to Secretary Anthony Fox. While at USDOT, Dorval helped manage a department with more than 55,000 employees and a $70 billion budget. And he worked hard to ensure that America's maintained the safest, most efficient transportation system in the world. In all of these positions, Dorval has been a beacon of integrity, intelligence, innovation, and yes, humor. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my friend, Dorval Carter.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. The transportation industry is undergoing a seismic change. I think all of you recognize that. The transportation ecosystem that we've worked within for decades has changed dramatically, and our customers now have more options than they've ever had before. In fact, the changes that we've seen over the last half decade have transformed the conversation that public transit officials are having from a traditional discourse about transportation to a more holistic dialogue regarding mobility. For large transit agencies like my own, the CTA, and of course the nation's largest, the MTA, we are busy determining how best to implement new technologies, form partnerships, and strengthen our existing legacy systems to better serve our customers. At this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce a part of the leadership team from the MTA, who will join us today to talk about the challenges and the opportunities that they confront in running the nation's largest public transit system. To my immediate left is Phil Eng, who is president of the Long Island Railroad. Next to him is Cathy Rinaldi, who is president of the Metro North Railroad. Next to him is Daniel. I'm going to try to say this correctly. DeCrescenzo. I'm close. DeCrescenzo. Got it. It is. Acting president of the Dorval Bridge and Tunnel Authority. Next to him is Andy Byford, the CEO of the New York City Transit Agency Authority. And then finally, we have Craig Cipriano, the acting president of the MTA Bus Company and acting senior vice president of the New York City Transit Department of Buses. Thank you all for being here today. So before I get started, I want to put a little bit of context around New York MTA. And as I mentioned earlier, I run the second largest transit system in the country. And I'm pretty impressed by that personally. But to provide some context around that, I've been telling a story to our panelists that when we first got together to talk about this panel, I had just gotten through a process of getting a historic level of capital funding from our state to fund transit in our region. And I was personally excited about the fact that we were getting about $7 billion in the new funding to support capital infrastructure investments for the Chicago area. And I was talking to Andy, and I was commenting on the fact that I just got this new state capital program, and Andy informed me that, well, that's great, because we just got a new state capital program as well, and we're very excited from our end. And I said, that's great, how much money did you get? And he informed me that they got $51 billion. But I think that gives you a sense of the magnitude of their system and compared to even the second largest system in the country. And I think that's part of why I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation with this group today, because I think they are going to really give us some true insight in terms of what it takes to really manage a system of that size and magnitude with the impact that it has in the city of New York, with the changing ecosystem that we're all dealing with here around mobility. So with that, let me start with a few questions. First, like many transit agencies across the nation, MTA is going through a period of incredible change and dynamic innovation. Andy, I want to ask this one to you first. Can you describe some of the projects and programs that you're working on to stay relevant in today's mobility ecosphere?
Sure. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming along. What I hope you will find will be an interesting panel. And Dorval, having a board announcement about the money is one thing. Actually seeing the cash is another. So we're not celebrating yet.
Fair enough.
but we're very pleased nonetheless. I mean, credit to my board, credit to the governor and to the legislators for so far recognizing the needs of the MTA, which, as you just described in your intro, are great. And the reason for that budget being so incredibly large, $51 billion over 5 years for the various agencies you see represented up here, is because we are dealing with a historical backlog of investment to really get the system back up where it needs to be. But also, we don't want to just get it up to a state of good repair and maintain the status quo. What we really want to do, and certainly speaking for my agency, New York City Transit, is go above and beyond that, way beyond that. We want to create a truly modernized transit system, modernized from top to bottom in every aspect. And for that, we need to embrace technology. And that's certainly something that Governor Cuomo pushes us on. He'd say himself, he's a real technophile. He loves technology. So we are actively looking to embrace new technologies. We've had a number of conferences where we have been engaging with academia, with startups, with disruptors, with different sections of industry outside the norm, if you will, to look at ways in which we can deliver what will be the fastest, most comprehensive upgrade probably ever seen in a major transit authority. So, I mean, just to put that into context, just again focusing on New York City Transit, of that 51 billion, as I said in the welcome yesterday, we have calculated we need, and we are going to get, subject to the cash flowing, we will need $40 billion, which is a huge chunk of cash in anyone's book. But the reason we need that is because, again, using innovation, we will be pushing on to re-signal the subway, the most important transformative thing that we can do for this system. It will make all the difference, transform reliability, transform capacity. I want there to be almost like a clock beat, heartbeat, relentless train service on every line. And for that, we will be using CBTC, communications-based train control, or something new technologies. We're very interested. In fact, we're testing ultra-wideband technology. We are going to push in an unprecedented time frame towards a fully accessible subway. So we're looking for innovative ideas, innovative ways in which to make our system fully accessible. And Craig will talk when he gets the chance to talk about what we're doing with the bus network. So it's a massive plan. It's predicated on innovative processes. We're working with what's called the Transit Innovation Partnership to truly embrace the genii, if that's the word out there, because we need all the help we're going to get. 10 years, we've said, for the full modernization. That's less than 4,000 days. So the pressure's on.
Absolutely, and that's a nice segue, Andy, from you to Craig, because that's my next person I wanted to ask a question to. Craig, obviously, I know that a rail system takes a tremendous amount of money to invest and get it to a state of good repair, but there are also issues on the bus side that you're dealing with, and I'd be curious to understand what your plans are with regards to the bus system with the money that you're going to be getting.
Sure, Dorval, thank you. So the New York City bus system actually carried 700 million customer trips last year. That's actually down 100 million customer trips over the last 5 years. So, there's plenty of reason for that, and it's not dissimilar to other major cities across North America. Back in 2018, Andy put forward the New York City Transit's Fast Forward plan, which really looks to speed up bus service and to bring customers back to the system. Additionally, I see my colleagues out from DOT. DOT, who we work very closely with, Polly Trottenberg, Janet Jenkins, put forward the Better Bus Action Plan, and they made a commitment to a 25% improvement in bus speeds. There's reasons why customers have left the bus system, namely congestion, slow bus speeds, competition from e-hails, TNCs, and the like. But we really want to bring people back to the New York City bus system because it really plays a major role in New York City's transportation ecosystem. So looking at the Fast Forward plan, a key pillar of our Fast Forward plan is the bus network redesigns. The bus network redesign is really a holistic view at our bus network in New York City, straightening out routes, consolidating bus stops, really taking a look at origins and destinations and redrawing the map. We had our first bus network redesign implementation in Staten Island and the Express Bus Network, and we're really excited that we've seen 1 year after that implementation, we see 10% improvement in bus speeds, we see shorter journey times, we see less standees, really exciting. This week, we're going out with our final plan for the Bronx, followed by Brooklyn and Queens. Getting on to bus priority, really think that's a key way to bring people and our customers back. And I don't know if everybody's seen the 14th Street busway this week, but that really was a big step forward to providing bus priority here in New York City. We're already seeing 40% better travel times across 14th Street based upon bus priority. We're excited about that. Other key initiatives we have are traffic signal priority. We're working closely with DOT. We currently have about 600 intersections with traffic signal priority. We have a commitment to 300 more each and every year. Bus lanes, we have 130 miles of bus lanes in New York City. This year, we're adding an additional, planning for another 23. We have a commitment to all-door boarding with the implementation of Omni. We think that's exciting. Reducing dwell times is another aspect of bringing people back to our system. And then recently, October 7th, we launched a new automated bus lane enforcement system. I got to give really kudos to another partner of ours, NYPD, who's dedicated 7 tow truck teams to the bus system and clearing our bus lanes. But quite frankly, you can only do so much, manual. So the automated bus lane enforcement system, we think, is a real game changer. I think, and lastly, if I may, going back to the capital plan that Andy mentioned, while we consider ourselves sort of the stepchild maybe of the New York City transit system, there is $3.5 billion that are dedicated to New York bus system, which includes 2,400 brand new buses equipped with customer-facing Wi-Fi, traffic signal priority, USB ports, digital screens, and the like. 500 of those buses will be all electric, and we're really excited about that.
That's terrific, absolutely. Yeah, give them a hand. Catherine, you're doing, I know, some things over at Metro North, and you also have some additional challenges with PTC and the work that has to go along with that. So could you talk a little bit about what your plans are with the upcoming capital program?
Sure. So Metro North, and I don't know that we're that different from Long Island Railroad in that regard, the capital program is very much geared towards state of good repair at this point in time for a lot of the reasons that Andy touched upon, that there was a long period of disinvestment. So this upcoming the proposed upcoming capital program is more than 90% investments in state of good repair. For the first time, we're really investing in a big way in and around Grand Central Terminal. So for the past two capital programs, there's been a program of priority repairs for the Grand Central train shed, which is essentially the structure. It was originally bridges that carried furniture vans over the Grand Central yards. So the priority repair program has not been adequate to keep up with that asset. So we're actually going to start a full-scale replacement of the Grand Central train shed. We're also going to begin a full-scale replacement of the Park Avenue viaduct, which carries more than 80% of our customers into and out of Grand Central, which is our only terminal. So in addition to that, we're going to be making a series of improvements in the Park Avenue tunnel. So we've got some major state of good repair programs going on in and around the terminal, which is the centerpiece of the Metro North system. In addition to that, there is funding for a very exciting network expansion project, which is Penn Station Access. Which is a project that is created and enabled by the East Side Access Project, which will bring Long Island Railroad service into Grand Central within the next couple of years. That will free up slots within Penn Station for Metro North service coming in along the Hellgate from the New Haven line. We'll be constructing 4 new stations in the Bronx, and there will be service both into and out of Penn Station through that southern eastern portion of the Bronx, which is currently very underserved by transit right now, and that will sort of knit the network together a little bit further. So that's a very exciting development for Metro North and for the region as a whole.
That's terrific. Phil, I know that from your perspective, you also face similar challenges around transportation investments, and so I know you're increasing capacity on some lines and things like that. What do you have planned?
Well, the proposed capital program builds on what we've done over the last few years, and my colleagues here across all the agencies, one of the things that we've all tackled was making sure that we took care of the issues that were causing many problems and delays to our riding customers. Those are the switches, the tracks, signals, and as Cathy mentioned, a very robust, high priority state of good repair and capital maintenance. But at the same time, it's a balanced program that enables us to allow that maintenance, state of good repair, buy us the time to deliver on critical infrastructure improvements that are not only going to improve reliability, but also operational capability and capacity across the system. But right now we have ongoing the mainline expansion project that we have in Nassau County. It's a 9.8-mile stretch that currently has 2 tracks, and the project will add a 3rd track, but it will also eliminate 8 grade crossings and multiple bridges that have been hit many times, causing delays to our riding customers. The ability to add this 3rd track will not only improve reliability of our service, but it gives us the ability to grow our service, because currently in the peak, in both directions, AM and PM, both of those tracks are needed essentially for one direction. By adding a 3rd track, we will not only be able to have the ability to go around service issues, but we'll also be able to provide reverse peak, which will be a huge economic generator for Long Island. It'll allow us to attract talent Long Island and help continue to see the growth that we're seeing across the whole island. This builds off of last year where we completed what we call the Ronkonkoma double track project. And that one we're also proud, finishing 15 months ahead of schedule, finishing that project on budget. We're seeing a tremendous amount of increased ridership across the Long Island Railroad. In fact, last year we carried 89.3 million riders. That was a modern day record for us. This year, into September, we're already carrying 1 million more riders than we did last year. We're continuing to see every month growth in our ridership, and that's even with all the work that we're doing, with all the outages that we're doing. So all of these infrastructure rebuilding is essential to the railroads being able to provide service. We're playing catch up. We had a lot of deferred work with regards to the need for these projects, and we're finally seeing the fruition of them. Just one point is that this third track project and double track Ronkonkoma project, they were design build. They're a partnership between the Long Island Railroad workforce and the private sector and the design build team. And I think it demonstrates that agencies can do things differently. It was a project that in 2016, when the governor announced that we're going to pursue this, it had really been on the shelf for 50 years, been talked about and never delivered. In fact, the railroad had considered it a dead project because there was so much community opposition. But with a new robust community outreach, the EIS process was completed in just over 2 years. Doing the design build procurement in parallel with the environmental process enabled us to accelerate the schedule. We broke ground a year ago, and I'm proud to say that that project right now, $2.6 billion, is on time, on budget. A few weeks ago, we replaced Nassau Boulevard Bridge. That's one of our most hit bridges in the system, a third ranked highest hit bridge. So this project is one by one eliminating systematic issues that were causing a reliability of service and building for the future.
Well, Phil, I can tell you there's nothing that gives me more pleasure than going to my board and saying the project is on time and on budget. So I can imagine that's being received very well.
And it's important because we're working to rebuild trust.
Yes.
You know, as we ask for money, we need to show that we can deliver these projects. We can deliver them on budget, and in some cases, we're delivering some of our other components under budget. So it's all important to say. If you're going to invest in us, we're going to deliver, and that's what we all intend to do.
I agree, and I want to get to a question in just a second about exactly that issue. The great thing about having $51 billion of funding to spend is that you have $51 billion. The hard part about having $51 billion is figuring out how you're going to spend it all efficiently in a way that can allow you to go back and get more. And I want to ask that question, but first I want to get to Daniel, because Daniel, I have something here in my notes that I just want to confirm from you directly. And my notes say that unlike everyone else that we're talking to here, your system is actually in a state of good repair. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're just focusing on maintaining a state of good repair.
Correct.
Good for you. That's something I wish we all could say right now. That's terrific.
You actually make money.
So talk to me a little bit about what you're going to be doing in terms of projects you're going to work on to maintain and keep the momentum that you've obviously got in place to stay within a state of good repair.
Well, Cathy just reminded me that we also make money at the TBTA.
Well,
So we have
okay.
the checkbook. Okay, so
We love him. He brings in the money.
Good point.
we have a 20-year rolling plan for our capital plan. We look at our assets every 5 years. We update this 20-year needs plan. Based on federally mandated biannual inspections, we have a comprehensive asset review to make sure we're up to the modern standards. We look at a hazard risk analysis review to make sure we keep the resiliency of our facilities up to speed on wind, flooding, fire, vessel impacts, which until recently, asking my engineers, seeing that we're protecting our abutments of our bridges. How often does it happen? But in this climate where the weather's changing constantly, that's a major concern to make sure we're protected underneath. Also, seismic activity is part of that hazardous analysis. The other piece of it is working with our partners in the state and the city and our sister agencies are right here to continue with regional mobility. So, again, I'm looking around the room and I see a lot of the partners that I'm speaking of. How do we continue to move traffic safer, quicker, over and through our facilities? So we were tasked back in 2017 by Governor Cuomo to have all our facilities open road tolling by the end of 2017. And I'm very proud to say that we did that in 9 months. So he gave us, I think, 11 months, and we did it in 9. We're already seeing the fruits of that labor. We're seeing travel time reductions about 26% over and through our facilities. We're seeing collision rates go down. So speeding up the traffic and making it safer, check. But how do we continue that? Because as traffic increases, because now we're putting something on the average of 900,000 vehicles over our facilities every day. So we have to look to our state and our city partners and say, how do we increase that regional mobility? So we're working on projects now in the capital plan now and in a new capital plan on how to move traffic not only over our bridges, through our tunnels, but as they approach and as they exit. I like to point out one particular project that we worked with city, state, and MTA bus, where we have now a dedicated HOV bus lane from Staten Island through over the Verrazano Bridge, through Brooklyn to the UL Cary Tunnel and back. So we reversed that in the afternoon. That was no easy task to put everyone together to get that accomplished. And Craig, I would say 20 to 30 minute savings in bus time.
Yeah, actually, many of the savings, or a lot of the savings that I mentioned earlier on the Staten Island redesign could be attributed to that aspect of it. So we thank you, Danny.
Well, thank you, and thank many of my partners or all partners that are out there sitting at the tables. For me, I come from an operations background, so I'm looking at how do we maintain this? How do we maintain keeping the ball rolling? Because you mentioned we have $52 billion. Where do you spend it? How do you spend it? How do you do it effectively? So we looked at how we move the plan. We looked at how facilities operate. So you have the capital plan, which is it's rehabilitating, it's new structures, but also you have that maintenance program that's maintaining the asset while you're waiting for that capital process to happen. So we have engineers that are embedded in an integrated fashion at facilities. So we have facility engineers that are empowered to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, working with maintenance forces, working with operations forces, because as we do these projects, or as these projects are completed, or as they're being worked on, how do we move all this traffic, but yet meet all these goals? Yeah. So you need operations to say, hey, listen, the traffic is lighter during this time, we could do this project at night. You need maintenance to weigh in so there's not competing goals of everybody trying to do work at the same time. So that facility engineer embedded in that process is huge. And then in the back office, the procurement process, making sure procurement is working with the contract managers, which is working with the project managers, and then on the roadway, making sure the projects are getting done. Yeah. So it's a whole team effort inside B&T with our sister agencies and with our regional partners.
Oh, that's terrific, and I agree. It takes a village, so to speak, to deliver on projects like this. And I think that's a nice segue into the question I was going to ask before I asked you your question, Daniel, which is, you got $52 billion worth of money. I know how disruptive construction projects, particularly on the rail side, I'll leave the bus side out of this for right now, but on the rail side, trying to do the work you need to do in order to bring your system up to a state of good repair or to properly maintain what you already have, it's very disruptive. And can you talk a little bit about sort of what your plans are, or how you're planning to sort of manage with your customers the disruption that you know is going to come out of the amount of work that obviously needs to be done, but for which there will be tremendous inconveniences while it's going on?
Sure. So that cuts my mind back to January of 2018 when we came together as a senior team, including Craig to my left as my bus supremo. Or it was actually Daryl Irick at the time, who's in here somewhere. A big shout out to Daryl. We put together this fast forward plan in less than 100 days, but in putting it together, and we were piecing together the constituent parts that were needed in terms of what needed to be done to truly modernize a transit system from top to bottom. And there were 4 key elements, and we'll pick them up as we work through this panel session. There were 3 things that we flagged in that document that were prerequisites for success. One of them, I mean, I'd actually add a couple of others. I mean, some were enablers as well. You've got to have the right team and you've got to have the right plan. Well, we've got both of those now. We've got the plan. It's captured people's imagination. You know, it's effectively like a taster. Do you want this? Does this look like the transit system of the future that you want? Stakeholders, media, public, advocacy groups, everyone embraced it. Everyone grabbed it and said, yeah, absolutely, we want that, get on with it. At which point we were saying, okay, show us the money. That's what's now needed. So you've got the plan, you've got the team, you've created that burning platform. We need 3 things. We need enduring political support. The reason I use the word enduring is a lot of these are long-term projects. You may not be the politician that gets to cut the ribbon, and so you need to think beyond maybe your political tenure, but you could be the visionary that kicked it off. You could be the person that started it. So that's one of the things we've really been pushing. Obviously, the second element was money, which we've already talked about. The third, and to your question, is about the patience of New Yorkers. There is no question. Doing this sort of massive overhaul in such an unprecedented, expedited time frame, it does require the patience of New Yorkers. You cannot, particularly on a 24/7 subway system such as New York's, you cannot upgrade the signaling system, modernize the stations, sort out the permanent way, in other words, the tracks and the drainage and everything else that needs to be done, without some disruption. So that's the deal. We will get it done, but we need your patience while we do it. So what we will be doing is packaging work. We will be looking to maximize the use of possessions, general orders, so that when we do have a track out for, say, an extended weekend, a long weekend period, or overnight, during that period, we will get as much done as possible. We will be working on the signaling system at the same time as we're renovating the station, at the same time as we are maybe working on elevators. So it's a massive coordination effort. There needs to be excellent alternate transit, which is where Craig and his team comes in. We need to excel at customer information. We need to excel at things like stakeholder involvement, so that community boards, elected officials, everyone knows what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the benefit is, and critical. We must finish the job on time, on budget overall, but we must give the subway back when we promise to after each and every GO. And that's where the hard work comes in.
No, and I know that that's an unbelievable undertaking, given both the jurisdictions you're dealing with and the size of the project you're talking about. I'll tell you a funny story. And in Chicago, we had to shut down the southern portion of one of our lines, what's known as the Red Line, for almost a year. We decided that the quickest way to do the rebuild was to actually shut the line down and then basically do it all at once, as opposed to trying to do it piecemeal over time while continuing to operate service. In the interim, we put in bus service to basically handle that corridor. We put in so much bus service, and the bus service was so good that when the line opened up again, the people didn't want us to turn off the bus service because they really enjoyed it that much. But getting to a point where you can really manage customers' expectations to the point that they appreciate the alternative service that you provide, even if it's more inconvenient than the service they're used to, takes a lot of planning and a lot of coordination to make that happen.
Let me just make one other point, Dorval, just really briefly. I think the skill to it is, because it will be controversial. If we try and take out, Craig tries to take out one bus stop in order to move service more quickly, World War III breaks out. It is just, it's incredible. So I don't underestimate the challenge, but I think the more that we can demonstrate, the more we can whet people's appetites with saying, we know that it's going to be disruptive, but this is what you can look forward to when it comes back. And it's useful to be able to point to actual success stories, such as, after a rather painful transition, we finally got the Flushing line, CBTC number 7 line across the line, now where we were delivering 25 trains per hour. We're now delivering 29 trains per hour, and we're hoping to get that north of 30. Where the service was very gappy, it's that heartbeat that I talked about, because we've switched on ATO, automatic train operation, and where the punctuality was around 62, something like that percent on-time performance, it's now regularly over 90. So I want to be able to point to those things and say, you want some of that? Bear with us, we will deliver it.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
If I may,
Greg.
Dorval, just to pick up where Andy left off, a key support and contributor, as you said, is the bus service, the shuttle service we provide to support the subways. Just to give an order of magnitude, it's not atypical that on a given weekend we put out 1,000 more runs than scheduled service to support all the tremendous work that's happening today on the New York City subway.
Mm-hmm.
Which creates its own set of challenges for you, I'm sure.
If I could add,
Yes.
the work that we're all supporting and the amount of outages that need to be provided is crucial to the success of those projects, the timeliness of those projects, and holding those budgets. But my colleagues mentioned the communication piece. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that when I first got into my position is that the customers had said we were not communicating enough. And I think one of the areas where we have made tremendous improvements is ensuring that when we're doing the work, they not only understand why the work is critical, but they also understand that we are providing alternative service. I referenced some of the work along the mainline third track project, and every grade crossing, every bridge that we're replacing, we've been doing it in these 55-hour weekend outages. And it's obviously a very time dependent to be able to restore peak service for Monday morning rush hour. But when you think about that, we're doing them on weekends, and our non-commuter ridership has actually gone up, and our ridership on weekends have gone up while we're doing this. We have 10 of those outages scheduled this year. In the past, if we did one per year, we would have been worried about it. And the fact that we can do both, carry more riders, get the work done, I think it goes to a testament to what we're all doing here in terms of giving the riders alternate service, directing them to other branches where we've enhanced service, or providing bus service if we need because between stations. But that all ties together to rebuilding confidence and showing people that not only are we taking advantage of the so-called off-peak hours, but we're doing more in that time frame. Aside from that work, we're doing state of good repair work, and we're tackling drainage work, and we're tackling inspections, and it's amazing how much we are piggybacking on these different outages, and that's another way we're looking to put the money in the proposed program and even the current program to best use, because the less outages, if you could piggyback on them, you're reducing your cost.
That's a very good point. I also imagine that the robustness of your system, the fact that you have multiple options in various corridors, also helps a lot with that process in terms of the coordination that has to occur between all of you in terms of providing that sort of improved alternative service when you're doing a disruptive project like the one that you're talking about.
So I had just a couple thoughts.
Yes.
So we haven't talked at all about the sort of structural reorganization that's happening at MTA right now. So as a condition of or as part of the congestion pricing legislation that was passed earlier this year, there has been an initiative to reorganize MTA as a way of showing that we, to Phil's point, can be more efficient with respect to how we operate and also how we deliver capital projects. So as part of that reorganization, there is going to be a new consolidated construction and development group led by Chief Development Officer Jana Lieber, and he will be tasked with delivering these large capital projects along this new model. So you will have, we've got this design build mandate for the larger projects, which has worked so wonderfully on the Long Island Railroad system. There will be empowered project CEOs to really try to keep things very focused and on target in terms of being both on schedule and on budget, because it really is incredibly important that we justify the faith that our customers put in us with respect to the delivery of these projects. The other thing that I would say is almost exactly a year ago now, Metro North launched its customer-facing Way Ahead program, which was essentially a strategic plan that was oriented towards the customer in terms of what can we do for the customer with respect to their expectations for the day-to-day, but also sort of longer term in terms of network expansion and improvement and that sort of thing. And as part of that program, we at Metro North launched something that we call Smart Track, which is sort of strategically identifying those segments of the system that require a special effort with respect to state of good repair because they are getting in the way of reliable service or because there's a specific safety issue, and then shutting down those segments for long periods of time and bringing in multiple work groups from multiple disciplines and just blitzing those areas in a very, very concerted way to be able to try to get them to a place where they need to be in a relatively short, concentrated burst of time. So we had a Smart Track outage in the Bronx in a very significant area of our territory, that all the trains ride over. And we essentially bussed customers from Melrose and Tremont stations for months so that we could get in there to be able to do, rail and ballast cleaning and all of that stuff, to be able to really get in there and get at the state of good repair issues that were plaguing that area. So it would require an enormous amount of patience from those customers in the Bronx. But at the same time, when we had our schedule change in September, it was done. It was done on time, and we were able to point to all of the work that was done. We're looking for other Smart Track opportunities throughout the territory to be able to be much more coordinated and thoughtful with respect to those kinds of inconveniences so that we can have something to show for it and something that we can sort of point to in a real and tangible way, that we're doing things differently and bringing more reliable service to our customers in a much more thoughtful way.
Well, certainly finding innovative and new ways to do things is something that customers appreciate.
And the messaging is key. To Andy's
Absolutely.
point, Phil's point, the messaging is key. People need to understand the reason for the work, why they're being inconvenienced, what we're doing to bring the projects in more quickly, and when it will end. Because if they see an end, they feel better about it. If it's just going to be like, no commitment made to when it's going to end, people get enormously frustrated. And that really damages the credibility of all of us and for the organization as a whole.
Well, and actually, that's a very good point, because a lot of times when we're dealing with sort of maintenance of our system or state of good repair work, it tends to have sort of a nickel and dime effect, where you're just constantly out there constantly doing the work, because you can't really put together the type of campaign that sends you in there one time, do massive, major work, but then you're out. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have faced with the lack of funding to get to a state of good repair, is that we find ourselves putting Band-Aids in place instead of doing the real tough job of really replacing it and bringing it up to the level that for the next 20 years it'll be fine. Figuring out how you get that balance, because, for example, in your case, Daniel, you're in a maintenance mode, and so there's going to be this sort of just ongoing need to just do what needs to be done. Which is very different than what your counterparts are facing here in terms of major rehabilitations just to get to where you are today. But your messaging, I assume, is very different than the messaging that that the rest of the team here would engage in terms of what you're telling your customers and how to manage their expectations around what's going on.
It's building on the state of good repair.
Yeah.
It's as I said before, how do we get better at what we already accomplished?
Yeah.
How do we become more resilient? How do we move traffic quicker? Looking in years past, like I mentioned, we just looked at the facility, and that was it. Now we're looking, 1 mile, 2 miles, 10 miles down the road, and you talk about communication to the public. I've seen, and I'm in my 30th year here, and I've seen more communication go out to the public in the last year and a half than I've ever seen in my 30 years. And not only communication to the public, but also the one MTA mantra, where almost on a daily basis, I'm touching base with Cathy, or I'm calling Craig, or I'm texting Phil, saying, hey, something's going on at my facility, or hearing that something happened at one of their facilities and saying, hey, do you need any assistance? So it's both ways. It's working within the MTA, and it's also being broadcasted out to the public.
Terrific, terrific. Let me talk a little bit more about technology. It's obviously having a real major impact on the way in which we conduct our business today, both in terms of communication, where we can use it to really communicate to our customers in real time. Our customers expect that type of communication now, but also in terms of the way we conduct our business. And I know that particularly in the bus side, in the fair media realm. There's some work that you're doing now and some new technology you're trying to bring on board. That's really what I view as part of the messaging to our customers, that we're being innovative and creative. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in that arena?
Sure. I mean, some of the technology that we're employing on the bus side, specifically is, as I mentioned, to move up buses faster. You know, we have a transit signal priority project. That's actually a joint project between the MTA and New York City DOT, where our buses communicate with the Central Traffic Management Center of New York City DOT, and based upon some predefined algorithms, they'll decide to turn the light green or to hold the green for our buses. And that was, I think, the first of its kind in the Central Traffic Management Transit Signal Priority model. Additionally, like I mentioned, we have the ability now to automated enforce our bus lanes. So we have a pilot on board the M15 SPH, which is on 1st and 2nd Avenue, 50 buses with cameras on the bus to catch vehicles that are blocking our bus lanes, blocking our bus stops. We recently got the ability, there's a graduated fine structure related to that, whereby your first violation, you're giving first a warning for 60 days, then it goes to a $50 violation, a $100 violation, all the way up to $250 violation. So that's another way that we're using technology to speed up our buses. I think a third key piece I want to share has to do with communications. You know, every new bus that comes in has digital screens. Those digital screens are connected both to our bus command center as well as to our digital communications unit, the folks that, you know, tweet out and they manage all the signs around the New York City transit system. I think that's a key piece, because we see, you know, a key way to bring customers back to the bus system is to have that constant communication. Let customers know that they might expect, say, a water main break coming up at 57th Street. Give them other options. So it's real-time information, it's near-time service alerts, it's next bus stop announcements. You know, I think that's another key piece that we want customers to have to bring them back to the system. I think with Omni, maybe Andy, you want to talk about
Sure. I mean, yeah, we're really excited about Omni. I don't know if anyone here today has used our Omni system. At the moment, we have 16 stations on the Lexington line, so that's Grand Central down to J Street. Atlantic Barclays, and also the buses on Staten Island, where there is a smart card technology. A lot of you will be familiar with that. The difference for New York is, whereas most places I'm aware of, in fact, just about everywhere I'm aware of, has initially started off with a bespoke transit card that you have to acquire and then tap and go, and as long as you've got credit on your card, you can board. We're moving straight to open payment, so that means you can use your Apple Pay wallet, you can use a credit card, you can use a watch, you know, whatever other medium you've got enabled. You will be able to pay as you go initially, but ultimately we'll be replacing our Metro cards, and it'll make such a difference. It really will. The speed's of the essence. Over the next year, every station, and we have 493, including Staten Island, and every bus, and the bus fleet's around 5,500. Every vehicle will be fitted with Omni, and that will again speed things up, because we'll at the same time move to all-door boarding. And that's another example, Dorval, of technology. The other thing is the use of digital communications, not just restricted to Craig and his bus team. My very good friend and colleague, Chief Customer Officer Sarah Meyer, has really made a difference in the subway of setting up a digital communications team in our rail control center. So we're really making a lot of use of social media, pushing information out, but also inviting customers to say what do they want on the medium of their choice, customized to their needs. What information do you want? When do you want it? Where do you want it? About upcoming information service disruption, for example. We've been putting up screens on platforms. We're making much more of an effort also to make sure that people for whom mobility is an issue, so people with disabilities, that they can see at a glance where elevators or escalators aren't working. So it's a real digital revolution.
No, that's terrific, and I know one of the things that we work at and with our transit systems is how to make them cool, particularly to the younger generation who is enamored with all sorts of new technology and stuff like that. And it doesn't hurt to have Tim Cook at Apple make an announcement as part of their big reveal that they're going to be running out Apple Pay for systems like yours and mine and others. And so you get the added benefit of being associated with a company that really, as a brand, has established itself at a totally different level, and transit is a part of that conversation. So I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for you to leverage those other type of partnerships as you try to move forward and encourage additional ridership on your system. I think it also creates the opportunity for people who are from out of town, tourists and others who aren't necessarily familiar with your system or the fare media that you use, to seamlessly move between cities without having to really think about it. And so I think there's a lot of great opportunity and innovation around all of that. You know, let me switch gears a little bit and talk to you about culture. You're obviously doing a lot of great stuff. You're leveraging technology. You're engaged in improving your system and at least incrementally moving it towards a state of good repair. How are you? You've got 74,000 employees. That's compared to 10,000 for me. So once again, you see the difference in order of magnitude. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with your employees. How are you basically messaging to them? How are you starting to change the culture of your agency to really start to reflect the reality of the world that we operate in today, which is very different than what we operated in 20 years ago?
Okay, I'll go first.
That's to anybody here.
This is a subject very dear to my heart, and I don't know if anyone from the TTC is still here, but certainly this was a signature piece of mine and my executive team back in Toronto, and we brought this same philosophy forward to New York City Transit. The way I look at life as a transit executive is, in many ways, anyone can go out and buy new buses, build subway extensions, do everything else, all the good stuff that we've been hearing about today. But it counts for nothing if you don't bring your employees with you, because if you really aspire to be world class, it's not just about having shiny new things. The customer's got to feel valued while you get them from A to B. So obviously job one is to move people from A to B safely, reliably, and punctually. But to be truly world class, you've got to feel, the customer needs to feel valued while that's happening. And every point of contact must be consistently excellent. So how do you do that? The only way you can do it is through empowered, motivated, cherished, well-led employees, team members, colleagues, who want to do a good job, not through coercion. So lots of people try using a big stick to get people to change their ways or to enforce a new culture. It doesn't work. You can't do it through coercion. Absolutely, you have to have command and control. You have to have performance management regimes. But the best way to do it, the enduring way to do it, is to get your employees, your colleagues, to do a good job because they understand the mission, they believe in the mission, and they want to do a good job because they see what the common benefit is, and they feel good about what they're doing. So how do you do that? It is about setting a framework that is employee-centric. So it's also about good leadership. If you ever follow me through one of our stations, you'll see it takes me forever to go through a station because I follow a rather circuitous route. Because mindful of my first ever job, which was station foreman on the Tube, almost exactly 30 years ago. My anniversary is coming up fast. I remember what it used to be like as a foreman to have top brass from London Transport periodically, not very often, come out of head office and turn up at my station. They would either stop and talk to you and you felt 10 foot tall, or more likely they would just walk past you as though you didn't exist. You were an expendable drone. I never want any of my colleagues to feel like that. So it takes me forever to walk through a station because I go and see the agent, I stop and see the CTA, the cleaner, I go and talk to the train crew. So we do that. We're doing what we call fast-forward dialogues, where one of a number of executives goes out to the workforce and we invite people to come along and tell us what they want to change about the culture. We're having an all-out push on employee facilities, some of which are appalling. I saw a washroom the other day, a restroom on one of our stations, employee restroom. I described it as Dickensian. It was appalling. It had no doors on it. I mean, who does that in 2019? So we're fixing it. I couldn't use it. Maybe it's just because I'm an uptight Brit. I don't know. I personally, I just couldn't use it. We make videos. There's videos that it's on MTA TV. It's got employee content. We do what we call on-the-spot awards. So this is the corollary, the reversal of what you normally, or what some places do, which is catch staff doing things wrong on the spot is catching them doing things right. So my senior managers have got cards and they say, that was fantastic what you just did. Here's a little token of appreciation. You come and meet the president. And finally, it's just small things, right? You lead by example. I have 50,000 employees, so you can imagine how many retire every year, right? And a lot of them have done 25 years or more. In the past, an auto signature was applied to those certificates. If you can be bothered to do 25 years service, I can be bothered to sign your certificate, so I do. I just sit there. I've now got, I have, what's it called?
Writer's cramp?
Yeah, what's it called? Yeah,
tunnel.
Yeah, that's the one, tunnel syndrome. Whatever, it's worth it because it's all about one team. That's what we talk about, team transit. That's what will get this company across the line, not just shiny new stuff.
Wow, that's terrific.
Absolutely. They're good people. They're good people.
Do you find, I mean...
If I can add to what
Yes.
Andy said, I think a lot of what we're trying to do in terms of changing the culture is to bring out those thoughts that they have. I think in too many times they've been afraid to bring up. We're so used to doing things a certain way that that's the comfort level of continuing to do it the same way. And I think the key is to let people know that there's no bad ideas, that we're always going to be willing to listen to the new ideas, and that if there's challenges to doing things differently, let management know, let management help solve those challenges, and then we can start tackling things differently. And it's not just the internal culture shift. You know, at the MTA, we're also working on shifting the culture across the industry. The companies that we work with, I think, are used to dealing with the MTA and the way we went about business for the last decade. And what we're trying to say is we may have done it this way last year and the year before, and it may have been successful. And just because we want to change it differently doesn't mean it was wrong. But we're just trying to find ways to keep moving with the times. And what we're asking industry is to don't just give us back what we've asked for. If you think there's a better way of doing something, please open up and speak to us. You're the experts. That's the reason we've contracted with you. And we're looking for all those new innovative technologies, methods, and just embracing change and trying to do it differently. And that's part of what we've, I think, been very successful as not only changing the organization, but changing how we interact with the industry.
Well, you know, it takes, as you all know, it takes a lot of support to be able to do what it is that you're trying to do here in New York, and that's both internally and externally. There's also obviously a lot of support you need from community organizations and elected officials and others who actually are the influencers, who ultimately are the advocates for what they want to see in terms of improved transit service in their community. Talk a little bit about sort of how you manage that aspect of your responsibilities. Obviously, people have very high expectations about what they want. You are limited in terms of resources that you're able to provide on a daily basis. But how are you getting that message out, and how are you working with community organizations and elected officials to really get the support you need, and also to maintain the patience that's required for the impact of the things that you're trying to do right now?
I think it goes back to what we were saying about communication. So you talked about community boards. So if we have a big project that's going to start and we know we're going to impact a certain borough or boroughs, we'll go out with a full team. You know, we'll go out with our engineer and our facility management team and our community relations team, somebody probably from the press office, and we'll sit there and give a full presentation to the community board and answer all the questions that they have and proactively go back to them with the answers to the questions that they had before we start the project. So now when the project starts, they can go to their constituents in their boroughs and say, no, we met with them, because they're going to get the complaints. Once people are driving the roadways and they see something, they get the calls, but then they say, no, we met with them, we asked these questions, these are the things that changed. It could have been worse, and maybe they take a little victory for, you know, their question and answer session. But the communication is key in getting out there way before the project begins.
No surprises.
No surprises.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I mean, it's really amazing the extent to which, I mean, the elected officials in our territory, they know cracks in sidewalks and potholes in stations, and that this particular stair has treads that need to be replaced. I mean, it's really very hyper-local. And I think it really is, incumbent upon all of us to be responsive because, again, it goes back to that credibility thing that if you are responsive on small things, people will trust you on larger things. So you can't, I don't think any detail is too small, frankly, in terms of, the need to be responsive with respect to things that we're hearing about from local officials. I mean, you need that partnership because you will need their support on larger things. So you need to be responsive on those, things that are small, that are big to your customers and can't be small to you. Let's put it that way.
So one of the
I
Andy,
was
you wanna
just
say
going to say,
something?
if I may, just really quickly
Yes.
putting on Cathy's point, I think that's a really insightful point because, and it's a bit like dealing with the unions in some ways, who are themselves, of course, also a stakeholder. What you have to remember is everyone has a constituency, and it may, as Cathy says, it may not be a big deal to you. You might think, well, that's not very important. It is to them. So with the work that Craig's been doing, we've been to borough presidents' meetings, we've done town halls, we've done community boards. We really do go above and beyond. We line up at bus stops and we talk to customers. What do you want from your bus redesign? So I think you do absolutely have to have, you've got to go the extra mile. Same as I was just saying, go the extra mile with your employees. Go the extra mile with stakeholders as well so that you get their confidence, they know that you've got their back, and that you're not going to embarrass them. You act upon things that are important to them, and you make yourself accessible. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. You've got to respond pretty much 24/7, right? You also need to have stakeholders on a board that support you. You've got to have people that have backbone. You've got to have visionaries. You've got to have people who understand what it is to be a board member, which is to hold you accountable, to be have good fiduciary responsibility, but let you get on with it. So I'm going to shout you out, Ms. Vanderpool. We have a lady there, Veronica Vanderpool, who epitomizes that. Veronica was herself an advocate, so she knows what it's about. I wish I could clone you because you are what, as someone like me, I need people like you who get it, who hold me to account, hold my feet to the fire, but who let me get on with it, and I appreciate that.
Andy, that's a very good point, and it leads into another question I wanted to put to the panel itself, which is equity. Clearly, there are limitations to what you can do as a transit system to really address the needs of all the communities and all the stakeholders who are interested in seeing improvements or enhancing their service. Talk a little bit about how you deal with the equity conversation and the decision-making process that you're dealing with right now, both as you roll out a new capital program and also as I know one of the things that I hear a lot is how much money I'm spending on rail versus how much money I spend on bus. And I try to remind people that with rail, I own the road and everything else. So it's sort of like if I own the bus system and also had to maintain the roads and the traffic lights and everything else, it would be a much more expensive proposition for me. But still, you're dealing with sort of balancing multiple priorities all at the same time. And I'm just curious to hear how you sort of manage that as part of your interaction with the stakeholders and the communities that you serve.
Sure. So I think one key piece of our network redesigns is transit equity. We take a look at origin and destination data. We take a look at demographics. We take a look at where subways do support, where subways are not. And we're taking sort of a clean sheet approach, and we want to make sure that people have the bus service, the public transit service that they need to get to where they want to go. One other aspect of the equation that we look at also, specifically in regards to our all-electric deployments and clean fuel deployments, is of course the environmental justice issues. We want to make sure that we spread those clean propulsion technologies equitably across the city. There has been some times in the past, quite frankly, where we've taken some heat based upon some, decision making that at some point, was proven not to be the case. But again, we recognize that people looking from the outside in don't always know all the, the data and don't always have all the facts. So we want to be, good neighbors and take that all into consideration and then communicate that out so people understand our decision making.
I assume transparency in how you're making decisions is a key component to that trust issue that you're talking about.
I think one of the things that as we move forward with the next 5-year program, and we start to talk to the different communities and elected officials with regards to local needs, that transparency in terms of how our system functions and the need that we need to take a look at the system as a whole, not just individual components, but how where we may be spending money in a different area of the system also impacts the riders that come from this community. And that's important because they're always looking at what is specifically in my neighborhood, but an investment just to the east or to the west definitely impacts the riders through there. And I think being upfront with them and letting them know what you can do, tackling the things like Cathy mentioned, the little things like broken steps, elevators, things that affect everyone's daily commutes and quality of life, that builds towards the ability to say, here's how we're going to get to the next phase of what you're looking for, and that we're going to continually make incremental, beneficial steps to improving the system as a whole and improving the system in the communities. Because we're seeing that as these systems are improving, we are seeing a huge movement towards transit-oriented development on Long Island, and we're seeing how that, with that, we're looking to leverage private sector investments to help us actually fund many of the requests. You know, one of the big examples that I can talk about is Elmont Station, which is going to be built along our main line in support of the new Islanders hockey arena that's being built in Belmont. When we were approached in terms of a need for service and a station, we talked about how we could do it, but we also were upfront that the railroad does not have any money set aside to do this, and that we would need to leverage the private sector to deliver a project of this nature. And that's exactly what happened. The private developer and the state came up with the full cost, and we're going to progress with a new station. And that's how we're having those communications with any area that's looking for service. How do we leverage private sector development? What kind of possible growth can that area do to support what you're asking? Because the last thing we want to do is make commitments and then give them subpar service because we've tried to make it sound good, but we couldn't really deliver.
Well, and I know that developers are becoming more and more acutely aware of the benefit of the transit investment to their development. And so, you know, having those types of conversations, and I think just as importantly, creating a pathway by which they can come to agencies like yours to initiate those kind of conversations becomes a key component to finding the way to create those partnerships.
Yeah. Two things that come to mind in response to your question about equity. The first one, I again want to talk a little bit about the Penn Access project, because one of the things that currently distinguishes Metro North from Long Island Railroad is that Metro North has a very, very robust reverse commute. And that's been historically the case for almost our entire existence. We bring a lot of people out of the city to employment opportunities in White Plains, employment opportunities in New Rochelle, Greenwich, Stamford. And the Penn Access project, which will create these 4 new stations in the Bronx that are currently not that well served by transit, don't only create opportunities for transportation into the city, but also will open up that reverse commute market as well. So these are areas in the Bronx where it will improve travel times dramatically to get to those job opportunities elsewhere on the New Haven line in the opposite, in the reverse commute direction. So it serves this particular area of the Bronx. I mean, the governor and the borough president were cheerleaders for this project for years. So I'm so thrilled that we're actually in a position to bring it to fruition. The other thing that I would say, and Andy's been obviously very, very active on this, and now we all are, is this whole issue of ADA access and the extent to which there are a series of priorities in this current capital program to make the system just infinitely more accessible to the mobility challenged. And sort of building on Phil's point a little while ago, these TODs also provide enormous opportunity with respect to the improvement of access. So that's an opportunity to sort of leverage those developments in and around the stations to provide new ADA accessible access to stations that might not otherwise be ADA accessible. So leveraging those private investments to improve the accessibility of the system, there's a lot of opportunity there, and something that we're looking forward to moving ahead with, both in this capital program and beyond.
Terrific, terrific. So listen, I know that I probably have about another 20 questions I could ask you just by myself alone, but I know that we want to open up the room and take questions from the audience so that I don't hog up all the time. So do we have some people who want to ask some questions of the panel? If so, please come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and ask your question. Yes, sir.
Ashok Kothari, WSP. I am working in Los Angeles doing the Purple Line. It's a 9-mile project. So helping Metro deliver this project on time and budget, which is a daunting task. Today I heard from the panel members that in New York, they are delivering the projects on time and on budget, which is music to my ears as a project manager. Traditionally, in our transit industry, that's not the norm. Most of our projects run late and they cost more. So would like Andy and others to share some of their wisdom, how they are making it happen now.
Yeah, what sort of innovative techniques are you using to help
for full
deliver?
transparency, we're not saying that every project. We've still got a way to go. You know, we're still working on this, but you know, the point we were making is we need to make that the norm. And the way we make that the norm, we're doing a number of things. We have looked at, you know, look back through the history of why it is that some projects overrun. Typically, it's because you haven't got the scope right in the first place. You haven't applied the right resources. You haven't properly thought through all of the design issues, such that then contractors, probably rightfully in some ways, have a field day with changes and variation orders, additional work orders. And you haven't really thought through your resource-loaded schedule or your the proper time frame. You haven't properly assessed the risks. There's so many pitfalls in a project, and that's why typically you know, these things go south. So we're learning from that. We are now, as a norm, we're adopting design build as a policy for any project, $25 million or more. We will be using design build with carrots and sticks, incentives, bonus payments and penalties if the project comes in late or over budget. And we're also adopting a policy of, or practice of having, for major projects, a project CEO fully accountable, held fully accountable to the board to make sure that these things are properly thought through, and that those, the list of myriad ways in which a project can come to get into trouble doesn't manifest itself.
Well, and Catherine, I know you were mentioning earlier about the internal reorganization that MTA is going through in terms of creating a specific department to focus on mega projects. I would assume also having dedicated resources that are really focused on delivering these projects. And are you bringing in all the resources from all the different agencies helps also sort of take out the risk that contractors inevitably are putting into projects as they pursue this, and helping to basically better manage it?
I think it goes back to your point about the culture as well, the overall culture of the place. I mean, there needs to be a buy-in to the need for all the departments to work together collaboratively to deliver these projects on time and on budget. And I think that kind of cultural change, or that cultural awareness, I think, has really taken hold in the MTA family as a whole.
Good, good. Do we have some more questions? First, Peter in the back, and then yes.
Peter Varga, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I had a long career in transit, still continuing. Andy, I want to thank you personally for signing each one of those retirement certificates. and not foregoing the shiny stuff, but really taking care of your team, your employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. And something else that we do, if someone gets a commendation about them, let's say on Twitter, because all you ever hear about is the bad stuff, right? Someone gets a commendation on Twitter that once upon a time just got filed. We print it out. I annotate it. I might say, well done, Peter, great work, sign it, and if possible, go and give it to the person. Go and find out where they are, either on a bus or on the system, go and personally present it to them.
That's terrific.
And I know you used to do the same sort of thing.
The little things really mean a lot.
Absolutely.
They really mean a lot.
No, they do, absolutely.
That's why you're like working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yes.
Sharif Abusab, HNTB. There is a disruptive business model and technology that is emerging fast and furious, which is connected autonomous vehicles. How do you see the integration of this business model in the next 20 to 30 years in the transit system, particularly Andy, if you could opine on that?
So actually, in terms of connected vehicles, that's another collaboration that we currently have ongoing between MTA and New York City Department of Transportation. there's actually a federal grant that New York City DOT is managing. We're providing hardware on board. I think it's something like 500 buses, if I'm not mistaken. They're also, New York City DOT is partnering with large fleets such as New York City Sanitation and NYPD. And I think this is really the first step. We're really just dipping our toes in the water here to understand what that looks like, to understand how vehicles can talk, amongst, an urban environment as New York City, and talk to the street infrastructure as well, to communicate back and forth. And I think this is, the beginning of where, we would get maybe someday in regards to autonomous vehicles. So that's where we're at right now.
That's an interesting question about automated vehicles and things of that nature. We're obviously facing a lot of challenges in our industry, both in terms of competition, but also just in terms of the way people think about mobility today. From your perspectives, what do you see as sort of the biggest challenge that you're facing in your respective agencies as we move forward to provide services to them? And we can just go down the line here. We can start with you, Phil, in terms of what do you see from your perspective as being one of your biggest challenges?
Well, right now I'm looking at continuing to leverage the investments we've made and continue to push forward with introducing new ideas and new methods of delivering work. And it's still building on the culture change that we've been doing. There's still this I think, comfort level with doing things the way we have done it. And I think a lot of times folks focus on certain projects, and I think we use those special methods on the ones that are high profile. Mm-hmm. But really what the goal is to ingrain this into the system where it's not just the $2 billion project, but it's also the $500,000 project that is being done somewhere else. It's the whole notion that everyone has to take ownership of their effort, and it's just as important, as Cathy mentioned, to fix a pothole in a platform or to address a leaking roof in a canopy as it is to expand the system. And that, building on what Andy's talked about, making sure that the employees know that every role that they have contributes to the overall success, and that it's important that the pride that everyone takes is really acknowledged by management, that management is here to support. And if you don't let us know the issues that you're having, we can't help tackle it. Mm-hmm. And it's, one theme that I've always said is I can't ask you to do more and I can't ask you to do it faster without making sure you have the right tools, the right direction, the right guidance and support. So it's a matter of the communication and continuing to build off of it, build off the successes, and make sure people know that they do have full support of not just management along our railroad, but across the whole MTA family. And I know the support is coming from all the way from the governor down. So it's a great feeling. The challenge is phenomenal, but the reward is incredible.
Terrific. Catherine?
So I want to answer this question also talking about people, but in a little bit of a different way. So I didn't get to answer the cultural question, so I want to sort of jump in and sort of give a shout out to the wonderful men and women of Metro North,
yes,
who bring it every day, and I couldn't be prouder to lead that group. The one thing that I would say, though, is that, and I don't think this is unique to the industry as a whole, we're sort of, in the midst of generational change right now. So Metro North came into existence in 1983. A lot of people are retiring. They have their 30 years, or they're close to their 30 years, and they're going. So we have this issue where we're losing a lot of experienced people, every day. I mean, I sign my certificates too, and not as many though. But they're leaving every day, every month. I'm signing another stack of certificates, and you've got that knowledge leaving, and how do you engage the new generation to want to come and want to stay? So there's an attraction challenge because of the nature of the work, and it's 24/7, and if you're junior, you're working all kinds of crazy hours on Christmas. How do you get people to want to sort of commit to that lifestyle in an environment where the job market is really good and where people don't stay? People, they have LinkedIn on their phones and they can get a job in 20 minutes, and they don't necessarily want to commit to that kind of a life. So how do you sort of entice the generation of millennials to want to make a career at the railroad, even as you're losing so many people to retirement? So I worry about that. I worry about about sort of the junior nature of my workforce, what that looks like over the next 5, 10 years. How do I get those people to want to come, make a wonderful career at the railroad, want to stay? So that's a people challenge that I'm very focused on and that we're working on, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, fair enough. Daniel?
Just to jump on a little bit what Cathy said, because I didn't answer the culture question either, but maintaining good people, investing in the people that you have, giving them opportunities while they're working within your organization, showing them different paths within your organization. Because sometimes you think that the person sitting next to you or in the cubicle next to you knows what you're doing every day, and they don't. So just within Bridges and Tunnels, with 1,300 strong, different departments don't know what the other departments are doing. So try to rotate people in different areas so they can maybe latch on to something that they didn't know they wanted to do when they join your organization, to keep them onboarded. As far as challenges for Bridges and Tunnels, we're not building any bridges that I know of coming up, or we're not digging any new tunnels.
You haven't checked the phone?
I haven't checked the phone. It might be in the 51 billion, I'm not sure. But looking at continuing the regional mobility, working with our stakeholder partners, our city partners, our state partners, the MTA family, and continuing to try to keep traffic moving over our facilities or through our facilities safe and efficient.
I think I'd say two things, Dorval. I'd say managing rising societal and stakeholder and customer expectations. People rightly are clamoring for more and better service. And that absolutely conflicts to a certain extent with the second big challenge, which is ever tightening operating expenditure budgets. We're in a good place on CapEx, we're in a very, very tight place on OpEx. So everyone wants more service, no one really wants to see a fare rise, no one wants to see more taxes, and yet the costs do inevitably rise. We can contain them as best we can, but that is an increasing and quite scary challenge, actually.
Greg?
I know there's someone who wants to ask a question, so I'll take just two quick short answers. One would be, sending a clear and consistent message across, my 18,000 employees across 28 locations, making sure I get that word down to our frontline employees. And I think the second biggest challenge is keeping up with Andy when we go to City Hall. He walks quite fast, and it's kind of difficult to do so.
Fair enough. Yes, sir.
Hi, Jeff Walker with RTD in Denver. I'm on the board. So a lot of board members don't work in transportation as a full-time job. So I'm wondering what methods you use, what programs, information you provide to get board members to that level of comfort for the changes to face this changing industry.
I know from my perspective, our board is very active. And when they're looking for specific information on different projects that we're having or we're about to onboard, we bring them in. We bring the board member into our facilities, or we bring the board member into 2 Broadway headquarters, and we go through the whole plan with them. We engage in a question and answer session with them, or we'll go to them wherever they are and bring the project to them. But our board is very, very active. They ask a lot of questions, and we provide this additional information to them when they request it.
Yeah, much the same for transit. We put together videos, but a picture tells 1,000 words. We do trips to work sites and trips to the rail control center, take them in a signaling room, show them what it's all about.
I know we were also talking earlier in the back room about briefings and how important the briefings are for the individual board members to really prepare them for the issues that they're going to be talking about. So I know in my case, and I know in your case as well, there's a lot of ongoing dialogue with board members to make sure that they do understand the issues, and that if they do have questions, we can give them the appropriate answers and information so they're in the best position to make the decisions that are going to be asked of them when the article is presented to them at the board meeting. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharice Myers, one of the middle managers at New York City Transit. And yes, hi, sir. So I wanted to know what was the possibility with the transformation plan going on of the Future Managers program coming back and being reenacted. And more importantly, it was an award-winning program at New York City Transit, but I'd like to see that program now across the board, where we could have managers that go crisscross and learn information, not just about the other divisions and departments at New York City Transit, but also learn information about the other we call it sister agencies. What's the possibility of some of that 51 billion?
Sure.
being
So it's not.
I don't think it's the 51 billion.
The 51 billion is CapEx money. So it wouldn't actually be for that, but it's a very valid question, and we should have a separate discussion, right? There's a reason why the fourth element of Fast Forward, everyone talks about the first three, transform the subway, reimagine the bus network, push to full accessibility. The fourth element is there for a reason, which was about this absolute all-out cultural transformation, change the way we do things, bring the employees with us, induce a customer-led ethos. So I'm very interested in programs like that. They were there for a reason. We are definitely interested in management development, staff development. I think you make a really valid point about lateral moves. You know, how the hell did I make it to president? Well, it wasn't by vertical integration or promotion. I made quite a few sideways moves, and I always think that's good advice to people. So let's have a separate discussion.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say too is that I'm a supporter of that program. Two members of my management team are graduates of the Future Management Program. John Kasich, who's SVP of Operations. Craig is not on my management team, but he's a graduate. Sue Doring is a graduate of that program. So it was an enormously successful program in terms of grooming and identifying people who might want to grow within the organization.
But I'd like to add to that also. I think the way MTA is transforming will actually improve the employee's opportunity to work across boundaries.
I think that's
and doesn't even necessarily mean you have to leave your current agency to work on another agency's project. The whole idea is with shared practices, shared knowledge, best practices, and making sure that people who want to raise their hand and get involved in another key project has the opportunity to do so. And I think it could become much more rewarding to employees to feel like the opportunity, when you think about all the agencies that we have, and it's not just commuter rails, it's transit, it's buses, it's highways and bridges. Think about all those opportunities that this consolidation will give our employees to spread their wings and really try different things. And it could be very exciting, and I know change sometimes is a little concerning to people, but I really do. I know in a past agency I worked in, it gives you the opportunity to touch things that you haven't had a chance to.
And it could be a good retention tool in that regard, yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Abdullah, here at New York City Transit. President Byford, thank you for your Fast Forward plan, the 4 pillars to revitalize and rebuild the subway. But can you explain, I know you make it look very easy, can you explain what are some of the challenges that in implementing the plan with providing the service that we give to 5.5 million riders, and what are some of the challenges in the political buy-in from the TWU and the SSSA?
Sure. Well, I'm mindful we're pretty much out of time, but so I'll keep it really brief. I mean, it is challenging. No one said it would be easy, but God, this is the daddy of transit challenges. There is a lot to do. So, I mean, you have political challenges, financial challenges. It's again back to that management of expectations. It's about balancing the need to improve existing service right now. So we've been focused on quick wins. In the last 18 months, we've driven subway performance up 20% by focusing on basics, stuff that should have been done years ago, but balancing that against the need to gear up and deliver the future. So again, Tony, it's something that I'd need to talk to you about in a lot more detail. Give my office a ring, but I'll happily set some time aside. We can go through it.
Well, I think it's also about having a really strong vision about what it is that you want to accomplish and being able to make that point to different constituencies in a way that they understand. So you should be commended for that. I've been reading about it quite a bit, so I know you're definitely there. One final question, and then we'll have to end.
Actually, it's a comment. Hello, everyone. My name is Kira Thomas, and I'm an operations manager at the Chicago Transit Authority. I am also a part of APTA Emerging Leadership Class of 2020. And I just wanted to say that the efforts that transit companies or transit authorities are putting into developing future leaders is very inspiring. So I want to thank you for creating that environment, and also let you know that it makes people like me want to go back and create other future leaders. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, fantastic. Good job.
And I personally can't think of a better way to end this session than that final comment. It speaks volumes to what I know all of you all are committed to, and a lot of the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of how we actually continue to move our agencies forward. At the end of the day, it comes down to people. And there's a prime example of what that really means. So with that, can I get a round of applause for the panel? You all were terrific. Thank you, everybody.